I'm not Eddie Graham. I'm not Bill Watts. I'm not Dusty Rhodes. I'm not Jerry Jarrett. But geez, since they're not sitting here, I guess I'm the best you got. There are similarities and there are differences. A singles match needs to go more back and forth. You don't get necessarily, because you don't get the pure baby faces using their teamwork to overcome the heels and frustrate them, and then the heels having to resort to, these illegal tactics and in and out and back and forth and behind the referee's back. In a singles match, you can't do as much behind the referee's back because there's nobody to distract. Even if there's a manager, still there's nobody on the other side to come in, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little more back and forth, but there's a lot of similarities.
What would you say are some of the most perfect tag teams that you've had a chance to work with, and what made them a perfect tag team?
Obviously we made more money than anybody else with the Rock and Roll Express because they were one of the, except for the Fabulous Ones, and we never worked with the Fabulous Ones, believe it or not. The Midnight Express, when it was Bob Eaton and Dennis Condrey, never worked with the Fabs, and we just never in the same place. But after the Fabs, the Rock and Roll were the first MTV-style babyface team, but whereas the Fabs were more kick-ass guys because they were bigger for the time, and they didn't sell as much, and they were more male modelish. There's Ricky and Robert, who are babyface at the time. I mean, look at the 80s music videos. Ricky and Robert looked like the average guy walking down the street. As ludicrous as it may seem to some people who were born in the 80s, yes, the bandanas and the long hair was over, folks. Watch the Poison video every now and then. Ricky Morton could sell his ass off unlike anybody ever. He could take a classic ass whooping. He could engender sympathy. He could make you believe that he was being tortured. And Robert Gibson, to be honest, was there to take that tag and clean house. It didn't have the same dynamic when you got the heat on Robert and gave the tag to Ricky. Both of them filled their spot perfectly. The Rock and Roll were a great team because of that. They were underdogs. They didn't have to be strong and kick ass and destroy people to get over. They did it because they were likable and they were feisty and they were underdogs. Fantastics, there wasn't, I think actually Bobby and Tommy were more interchangeable in their parts, and it didn't hurt to match because they were both underdogs, and there wasn't a real big size difference. But what great workers and what great athletes, and they both could sell. The Southern Boys we had great matches with because Tracy's mother, Steve Armstrong, we got him over in Baltimore. On these the Midnight Express tapes you'll see, and I'm not saying that we're responsible for their success. I'm saying that when you take the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys with stars and bars, Confederate flag on their ass, and waving the flag and send them into Baltimore, that's a recipe for destruction. Better you should send, like Louis Farrakhan to a Nazi meeting than send the Wild-Eyed Southern Boys to Baltimore. But the people there believed in the Midnight Express. The Southern Boys were just coming in, and they farted on them. But then all four guys had such a great match that at the end they gave them a standing ovation because they saw they were talented and they could look past the regional gimmick. We had so many good matches with different kinds of tag teams. Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, I wish so much that we'd had a chance to run that thing for 6 months. Because we had maybe 6 or 7 arena matches with them and nothing on television before they ended up leaving and going to the WWF. But the matches were tear the roof off the place type of matches because it was really 4 excellent workers, doing what they could do. And then me and JJ stand outside going, okay, he had a shoe, I had a tennis racket, and we're watching them. We're having fun too. But there were a lot of teams you could have. One good thing about an old-fashioned, especially an old-fashioned Southern heel team, they could change the kind of match they had and change their style to fit the opponent. We wouldn't have the same match with the Road Warriors as we did with the Rock and Roll Express, as we did with the Fantastics, as we did with the Southern Boys, as we did with Brian Pillman and Z-Man, as we did with Bill Watts and Junkyard Dog, as we did with whoever. Because the heels, especially in those days, were responsible in a lot of part for leading the match, and the idea was to get the babyface over. Actually get the match over. Dennis Condrey always said this, and you ask him about this, get the match over. Because a lot of guys are just worried about getting their own stuff in and them looking good. Well, you know what? Transfer this to Hollywood. who's a great actor these days? I'd say Laurence Olivier, and nobody was even born by the time he died. If he's dead. Say again now. Leonardo DiCaprio. Is he a great actor? Or is he just
Robert De Niro?
Robert De Niro. There you go. De Niro, Pacino. They've made some really stinky fucking movies. Not a lot, but some. And people remember, well, there was goddamn a stinky fucking movie. But if a great actor is in a great movie and everything gets over, then they start winning Academy Awards. Who's the last person that won an Academy Award for a great performance in a box office stinker? Can you think of any? I can't. I'm not prepared. Point is, get the match over and the people will remember, I saw the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express in a great match. Not, I saw the Midnight Express in a match with, Tom and Bill, and boy, it pretty well fucking sucked, but the Midnight Express got their shit in. The fuck? If the match stinks, it don't matter whether you got your shit in or not, because it still stunk. And we've had some stinkers because things just didn't line up right, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Get the match over. Don't get your shit in.